It started
coming
with a
by
message
more often.
I didn't expect.
Sometimes with an
Hey,
excuse.
can
A
I talk
book
to you
he
about
forgot,
something personal?
A question about
It was
cooking
from
or
Ethan,
help with his
my
resume.
best friend's son.
But more often,
I'd
it was
known
just
him
to
since he
talk.
was in diapers.
He'd lean against
Watched
the
him
counter
grow
while I
up,
cleaned up,
helped him with
or
homework,
sit on the couch
cheered at his
scrolling
soccer
while I
games.
sipped wine.
We talked about
everything,
everything,
his childhood.
Now he was a
my
man,
failed
22,
marriage,
maybe 23,
his dreams of traveling.
and suddenly he wanted
there
to
was
talk.
an ease between
I
us,
was surprised,
a
but
rhythm
curious.
I hadn't felt
I
in
told him
years.
to come by that
He wasn't just a
afternoon.
boy anymore.
When he arrived,
and
it was
I
like
wasn't
seeing
treating
someone
him
familiar,
like one,
but new
One
at
evening,
the same time.
he told me he was
He was
tired
taller
of feeling
than I
like he had to
remembered,
prove himself to
broad-shouldered,
everyone.
confident
You're the
in a
only
quiet
one
way.
who makes me
He
feel like I'm
smiled
enough,
and gave me a
he
hug,
said.
and
I
felt
felt
something
tighten
tighten in
shift.
my chest.
I brushed it off.
Compliments had always
I told
felt
myself
empty from
it was
others,
just nostalgia.
but coming from him,
He sat across from
it
me in the
reached
kitchen,
someplace deep.
fidgeting with his phone.
I told him
eyes
he had
down.
more strength
I just
than he
needed someone to
realized.
talk to.
He
He
smiled
said.
and said,
Someone who
"That's
actually
why
listens.
I come here.
I
You
asked
make
what
me
was
feel
going on.
seen."
He spoke
Our
about
conversation
feeling lost.
started getting more
Said he
personal.
broke up with his girlfriend.
He'd ask about my
couldn't
past
talk to his mom,
relationships, my
didn't feel
regrets,
like anyone
what I missed
really
most.
got him.
I
He
found
looked up,
myself answering
eyes soft,
honestly.
and said,
I told
"You've
him how I
always
missed
been
affection.
different.
You're
How
easy
I
to talk to."
sometimes felt invisible.
I smiled.
He didn't judge,
flattered,
He
but
listened.
I kept things light.
Really listened.
I'm old enough to be your
One
mom.
day, he said.
I joked.
If someone
laughed.
ever made you feel
You don't
less
feel
than
like a mom.
amazing,
We
they
ended
didn't
up
deserve
talking
you.
for hours.
I laughed
About
it off,
life,
but I
love,
carried his
his
words
frustrations
with me
with
all
college,
night.
his
There was a
fear of
moment,
failing.
innocent,
I found myself
technically, but it
opening
stuck.
up too.
I had
about
just
how
reached
distant
for
things had
something
become
higher
in my own
and
life.
he
How being
instinctively
single at
came
my
behind
age
me
was
to help.
lonelier than I'd
His
admit.
hand brushed my
He listened
side.
closely,
We
more
both
attentively
froze.
than most
Just
people
for a
ever
second.
did. When
He
he left,
apologized
he
softly.
thanked me and said,
I said it was okay.
I feel better.
But the silence that
Can I talk
followed
to you
said
again
more than
sometime?
either of us
I
dared to
said
admit.
yes without thinking.
Something had cracked
Over the next
open.
week, he
After
messaged
that,
me often.
every glance
Always
lingered
respectful,
longer.
Always sweet.
Every touch felt
He'd
heavier.
ask how I was doing.
I told
say
myself
things like
it was just
you looked
attention.
really good today.
That I was starved for
I
connection.
told myself,
and that
he
was all
just
this
being
was.
kind.
I wasn't
But
doing
something
anything
inside
wrong.
me stirred.
I wasn't
I
flirting.
started looking forward
I
to
was
his
just
texts,
enjoying being
to hearing
noticed.
from him.
But
My
I
heart
knew I
would
was
skip a
lying to
little
myself when I saw his
I had
name
started
pop
wearing
up.
things I wouldn't
hated that
normally
it felt
wear
good.
around him. One night
Subtle,
he texted,
but
"Wish
intentional.
I could just sit with you
Lipstick
right now.
I hadn't touched in
Feels
months.
like you're the only
Tops that
person
fit
who gets
just
me.
a little closer."
I sat
Every
staring
time
at my
he
screen
complimented
longer
me,
than I should have.
I
Then
felt more
replied,
alive.
Anytime,
and more
Ethan.
ashamed.
That
One
night,
he
I
told me
couldn't
about a
sleep.
girl he had been
I knew
seeing
this
casually.
wasn't normal.
It wasn't
I knew
serious,
it wasn't right,
he said,
but I didn't
she
stop
didn't
it.
really get
I
me.
told myself,
Then he
I
looked
was
right
just
at me
being
and
there
added,
for someone who
not
needed
like
support.
you do.
That he was
My
my friend's
stomach
son.
flipped,
and
I
I
changed the
never
subject,
crossed that line.
but
my voice
something
shook.
told me
He noticed.
I'd already started
I shouldn't
to blur
have
it.
said that, he murmured, but I meant it.
I could have stopped it then.
I could have drawn a line, shut it down, reminded him who I was to him, but I didn't. I let it sit there, between us, daring us to pretend it meant nothing. And it didn't go away. A few days later, he stopped by late. Said he just needed to clear his head. We ended up sitting close on the couch, and for a while, we just talked. I don't even remember what about. But I remember the way he looked at me, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure he should. Then he reached out, slowly, and tucked a piece of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my cheek. My breath caught. I froze, not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to move and make it stop. I said his name, soft and warning. He pulled back immediately, apologizing again, but I could tell he didn't regret it. Neither did I. That night, I lay awake replaying every second. Not with guilt, with longing.
And that terrified me. From that point on, everything changed.
The tension was there, in every conversation, in every accidental brush of his arm against mine. He'd text things like, thinking about you, or miss our talks. I didn't stop him.
I didn't want to.
I started deleting messages, keeping our conversations private, even though we hadn't technically done anything. But emotionally, we were far past where we should have stopped. One afternoon, he told me he had a dream about me. Said he didn't want to make it weird, but he couldn't get it out of his head. He laughed as he said it, trying to play it off. I laughed too, but my skin burned. I felt exposed.
Seen.
Wanted. And I couldn't deny that it excited me. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was real. He'd find reasons to sit closer. His touches lingered, my shoulder, my hand, my back. Always gentle. Always with that pause. And every time I let it happen. One evening, as he stood to leave, he turned around at the door. I'm not a kid anymore, he said, looking right at me. You don't have to keep pretending like I am. Then he walked out. I stood there in silence, heart racing, the weight of his words settling over me like a fog. He was right. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was participating. Quietly. Willingly. And whatever came next, I knew it wouldn't be innocent. He started coming by more often. Sometimes with an excuse, a book he forgot, a question about cooking, or help with his resume. But more often it was just a talk. He'd lean against the counter while I cleaned up, or sit on the couch scrolling while I sipped wine. We talked about everything: his childhood, my failed marriage, his dreams of traveling. There was an ease between us, a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. He wasn't just a boy anymore. And I wasn't treating him like one. One evening, he told me he was tired of feeling like he had to prove himself to everyone. "You're the only one who makes me feel like I'm enough," he said. I felt something tighten in my chest. Compliments had always felt empty from others, but coming from him, it reached someplace deep. I told him he had more strength than he realized. He smiled and said, "That's why I come here. You make me feel seen." Our conversations started getting more personal. He'd ask about my past relationships, my regrets, what I missed most. I found myself answering honestly. I told him how I missed affection, how I sometimes felt invisible. He didn't judge. He listened. Really listened. One day, he said, "If someone ever made you feel less than amazing, they didn't deserve you." I laughed it off, but I carried his words with me all night. There was a moment, innocent, technically, but it stuck. I had just reached for something high up, and he instinctively came behind me to help. His hand brushed my side. We both froze. Just for a second. He apologized softly. I said it was okay, but the silence that followed said more than either of us dared to admit. Something had cracked open. After that, every glance lingered longer. Every touch felt heavier. I told myself it was just attention, that I was starved for connection, and that was all this was. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I wasn't flirting. I was just enjoying being noticed. But I knew I was lying to myself. I had started wearing things I wouldn't normally wear around him. Subtle, but intentional. Lipstick I hadn't touched in months. Tops that fit just a little closer. Every time he complimented me, I felt more alive. And more ashamed. One night he told me about a girl he had been seeing casually. "It wasn't serious," he said. "She didn't really get me." Then he looked right at me and added, "Not like you do." My stomach flipped. I changed the subject, but my voice shook. He noticed. "I shouldn't have said that," he murmured, "but I meant it.
I could have stopped it then.
I could have drawn a line, shut it down, reminded him who I was to him. But I didn't. I let it sit there, between us, daring us to pretend it meant nothing. And it didn't go away. A few days later, he stopped by late. Said he just needed to clear his head. We ended up sitting close on the couch, and for a while, we just talked. I don't even remember what about. But I remember the way he looked at me, like he wanted to say something but wasn't sure he should. Then he reached out, slowly, and tucked a piece of hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed my cheek. My breath caught. I froze, not because I was scared, but because I didn't want to move and make it stop. I said his name, soft and warning. He pulled back immediately, apologizing again, but I could tell he didn't regret it. Neither did I. That night, I lay awake replaying every second. Not with guilt, with longing.
And that terrified me. From that point on, everything changed.
The tension was there, in every conversation, in every accidental brush of his arm against mine. He'd text things like, "Thinking about you," or "Miss our talks." I didn't stop him.
I didn't want to.
I started deleting messages, keeping our conversations private, even though we hadn't technically done anything. But emotionally, we were far past where we should have stopped. One afternoon, he told me he had a dream about me. Said he didn't want to make it weird, but he couldn't get it out of his head. He laughed as he said it, trying to play it off. I laughed too, but my skin burned. I felt exposed.
Seen.
Wanted. And I couldn't deny that it excited me. It wasn't a fantasy anymore. It was real. He'd find reasons to sit closer. His touches lingered, my shoulder, my hand, my back. Always gentle. Always with that pause. And every time I let it happen. One evening, as he stood to leave, he turned around at the door. "I'm not a kid anymore," he said, looking right at me. "You don't have to keep pretending like I am." Then he walked out. I stood there in silence, heart racing, the weight of his words settling over me like a fog. He was right. I wasn't pretending anymore. I was participating. Quietly. Willingly. And whatever came next, I knew it wouldn't be innocent. I ended it before it destroyed me completely. I never planned for. Not with a dramatic confrontation after a fight with his mom, harsh words, his voice shaking, I just stopped responding. Tense. When he messaged, he said he felt like no one respected him. When he called, even she still treated him like a child. At first, I offered him a drink. Then more out of instinct than intention. Did I do something wrong? We sat close, shoulders brushing. Are you mad at me? He was quiet tell me what's going on. Then he said, I don't want to be seen as some kid anymore. Not because I didn't care, but especially because I cared too much and there was a pause I didn't fill. The silence grew between us like a wall. Soft, a week hesitant, like he expected me to pull away. And finally, he stopped trying. I didn't even think. I could breathe again. I kissed him back. It didn't feel like relief. That moment, it felt like mourning something I was never supposed to want in the first place. Washed over me so fast. I looked in the mirror. I didn't have time to consider what it meant. Didn't recognize the woman staring back. It wasn't some whirlwind. Not because it wasn't fireworks. I was ashamed. It was something deeper. I knew I'd changed. What started as attention had turned into obsession. The guilt didn't come until afterward. What felt like connection I watched had turned into a secret. His arm resting across my stomach. I avoided his mother like the plague. I made excuses, skipped lunch dates. Instead, I felt something like comfort. She noticed, and that scared me more than anything else. Are you okay? I had just crossed the line. I told myself I never would. I told her I'd just been busy. I didn't feel regret. Needed time to myself. Seen. She hugged me and said, "The next morning, always here if you need to talk." Like nothing happened. And I almost broke. He smiled. The guilt hit like a punch to the throat. Called me beautiful. She trusted me. Like we were a couple. Child. Like this was normal. I gave into something selfish, I didn't know what to do with reckless that. And wrong. I wanted to tell him it was a mistake. He didn't say a word to her. I couldn't find the words. Maybe out of respect. Not when he looked at me like cared. I was everything. Maybe he was scared too. Not when I hadn't felt like that in years. Our secret stayed but reality buried. Didn't wait long. But the damage had already been done. While we were sitting on the couch. I couldn't look at her without hearing the echo like my everything was fine. I couldn't look at myself without wondering, thinking about what we'd done about him, what she would say if I just needed someone. The weight of betrayal started sinking still mattered, and yet weeks turned into months. I didn't ask him. We never spoke again. He stayed that night. Not a single word. The problem wasn't just what we did. No explanation. We kept doing it. Just absence. But the weight of it never left me. And each time it felt easier to justify. I convinced awkward conversation he was with his mother that this wasn't me taking advantage. I sat alone thinking about how easily I crossed in the quiet moments. I once believed I knew what I was doing. Uncrossable. I was hiding. He was never the villain. And I wasn't a woman who trusted me completely. We both chose it. It got worse when he started acting possessive. Into something we couldn't sustain. He'd ask where I was, but the cost didn't answer fast enough. I lost a friend I loved. He wasn't jealous in a dramatic way. I lost pieces of myself in the undertones in the way he spoke my name. I started to feel like that I was being swallowed up in something only to leave me more hollow than before. Then came the slip. People think infidelity mentioned that he was different lately, lust or weakness, more distant, but sometimes always it's about going somewhere but not saying where. Aching hunger to be seen him. Touched, I lied, heard. I said I hadn't spoken to him in a while. Finally looks at you like you're not invisible. The guilt almost made me choke. You forget everything else. I couldn't even look her in the eyes. Even who you are. He wanted more from me. I don't tell the story because I'm proud. If I ever thought about what it would be like if we didn't hide. Because I laughed at the idea. And not because it was funny, but I'll never be free of it. I didn't know how to answer. He asked for help. I wasn't in love with him. And I gave him all of me. I was addicted to how he made me feel. I lost more than I ever expected. One afternoon, and I caught him looking through photos on my fridge. Pictures of me and his mother over the years. Vacations, birthdays, memories that now felt like evidence. He asked, "Do you think she'd ever forgive you if she knew?" I didn't answer, because I knew the truth. She wouldn't, and she shouldn't. That night, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The thrill was gone. All I felt was the slow, cold realization that something had broken. Not just a rule. Something deeper. Something that couldn't be undone. I ended it before it destroyed me completely. Not with a dramatic confrontation or harsh words. I just stopped responding. When he messaged, I gave short replies. When he called, I let it ring. At first, he didn't get it. Then came the questions. Did I do something wrong? Are you mad at me? Just tell me what's going on. I said nothing. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much and hated what that meant. The silence grew between us like a wall. A week passed. Then another. And finally, he stopped trying. I could breathe again, but it didn't feel like relief. It felt like mourning something I was never supposed to want in the first place. I looked in the mirror and didn't recognize the woman staring back. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew I'd changed. What started as attention had turned into obsession. What felt like connection had turned into a secret that could ruin lives. I avoided his mother like the plague. I made excuses, skipped lunch dates, ignored texts. She noticed. She always noticed. Are you okay? You've been distant. I told her I'd just been busy, needed time to myself. She hugged me and said, "I'm always here if you need to talk." And I almost broke. The guilt hit like a punch to the throat. She trusted me with her child. And I gave in to something selfish, reckless, and wrong. He didn't say a word to her. Maybe out of respect. Maybe because he still cared. Maybe he was scared too. Either way, our secret stayed buried. But the damage had already been done. I couldn't look at her without hearing the echo of my own betrayal. I couldn't look at myself without wondering if this had all been about him, or if I just needed someone, anyone, to remind me I still mattered. Weeks turned into months. We never spoke again. Not a single word. No apology. No explanation. Just absence. But the weight of it never left me. It clung to every quiet moment, every awkward conversation with his mother. Every night, I sat alone thinking about how easily I crossed a line I once believed was uncrossable. He was never the villain, and I wasn't entirely the victim. We both chose it. We both fed into something we couldn't sustain. But the cost was mine. I lost a friend I loved like family. I lost pieces of myself I can't get back. And for what? A handful of moments that made me feel alive, only to leave me more hollow than before. People think infidelity is always about lust or weakness. But sometimes it's about hunger. A deep, aching hunger to be seen, touched, heard. And when someone finally looks at you like you're not invisible, you forget everything else, even who you are. I don't tell this story because I'm proud. I tell it because it happened. Because I let it happen. And because if I pretend it didn't, I'll never be free of it. He asked for help. And I gave him all of me. But in doing so, I lost more than I ever expected. And some lines, once crossed, don't ever fade.